Hi.
Hey, guys.
This is so weird. Sorry, we have to apologize a little bit. We were not expecting to be like on the TED Talk Janet Jackson stage, so I'm a little like, can everybody just like scream or something for me? Like, oh my God, here's Emma!
That helps.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
And if you want, come a little closer.
Yeah, in case you guys can't hear us, also, we are hoping to do questions at the end, so if you can get a little bit closer for the questions, that way you can yell them at me and then I can repeat them. That will help a little bit.
Is the reserved press table still accurate?
No, come on up. Yeah. I'm really loud.
If we have press, I think I've done something wrong.
You have to understand, anyone who knows us, we were just joking about this, we like literally sit behind a desk with a headset on all day. And so this is really weird. All right, Jenkins FOMO, thanks for coming. Objectives and goals, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, and our slides are not, again, we didn't expect to be in this little place, so a big place, so the slides are not fancy. But I want to just sort of establish why we're here. I'm a big fan, I'm a customer success manager, product owner by trade, and so I'm a big person about like, why are we here and how do we know if we've gotten to our goals? So I want to talk about a little bit about why we're here. As we all know, our industry is changing faster than ever. And as a result, it's impossible for any one person to have all of the answers. If you happen to have all of the answers, please come see me after because that would be awesome. But I don't know that anybody does. So while that's happening, each of us works in a unique environment, but there are common use cases across everybody's stuff, right? So we all have sort of snowflakes, everything we're doing is unique, but at the same time, there's a bunch of things that we can share in common. This one's incredibly important to me. As members of the DevOps community, we are committed to continual improvement and are open to learning and sharing with others. And a critical part of our success as DevOps professionals is connecting with other people who work on similar issues. I find more and more every day with my job that it's not always about the technology, it's about the people and the silos and breaking those down and talking to each other, and that's hard. So Alex and I work with all sorts of organizations on all sorts of Jenkins and DevOps topics, and we're here because we want to help facilitate within the community sort of the transfer of all that knowledge. Last little bit I want to put up here, just kind of disclaimer. We're not doing FOMO that's the future. Like this morning, like KK talking about the superpowers of Jenkins or Christina talking about the new products. We're talking about FOMO about what's happening right now.
Exactly.
And Alex will talk more later, I promise. I chatted.
No, I'm just going to stare at her like...
Hit it. All right. So goals, I'm really big on this one. And we're going to come back to this at the end because you have to evaluate everything, right? You have to know if it worked. How will we know that it worked? By the end of this, everyone in this room will be able to identify 2 specific areas of improvements related to DevOps. I mean, if you have personal issues, you can work on those too, but maybe not right now. Just the DevOps stuff on which to focus during this conference. Recognize at least 2 new tools that you will be able to address that area of concern. So think about what hurts, and then we're going to try to find something or someone to pair you up with to help you get through that. And then describe a use for Jenkins which you have not previously known. And hopefully connect with somebody, at least one new colleague, outside of your team who is working on a similar area so that you can connect and share information. It's not intended to be technical, so this is not going to be a deep dive into any of these items. It's going to be more of we're going to go through a lot of stuff really quickly. And what else? Oh, presentation creep. That's my little joke. To avoid that, we're going to time box each session. So I may actually need help with that, but we'll see, so that I don't babble, because I babble. Who are we?
I'm Alex Taylor. I work on the support team over at CloudBees. I'm one of the senior DSEs there. So anytime, if anybody has opened a ticket with CloudBees, I have almost certainly touched at least one of your tickets.
Alex Taylor has saved my tushy 1,000 times a day. Anyone else who... Yeah, has anyone here ever interacted with Alex Taylor who might be a customer? Oh, right? Right?
That's good. Thank you. That's exciting. That's a lot more than I thought there would be.
Alex has taught me so much in the past year, I can't thank you enough. I'm Karen Taggart, Senior Customer Success Manager at CloudBees. I'm the crazy dog lady at Twitter. Hit me up. And make sure you're tweeting about this, because I love that. And please use the app, if anyone's downloaded the app, for feedback about this session and any other sessions that you've attended. So kind of just quick value add about what Alex and I think we have to offer. We work with, goodness, I mean, hundreds of people
Yeah.
all the time with questions about stuff related to Jenkins and DevOps. So what we wanted to do is come to the table and kind of sort through some of those issues and tell you what we see people doing, tell you what we see people having problems with, and kind of Alex is going to cover the technical end of it, and I'm going to cover more the business end of it as we go through. I want to let you know Alex and I don't always agree. It's been known to happen that we will fight. I can't say that won't happen today. It might. So just because we come at things from a different perspective. Anyone ever had that? Like you're talking with somebody and maybe your CIO has a different idea than your engineering manager? I'm not saying I'm the CIO in this situation, but maybe. All right, we're good. So be afraid, be very afraid. I think we can go to the next one, can't we?
Yeah.
Yes. Here's what I want you to do. And this is audience participation, but I love it. It's my favorite kind because it's silent. You don't have to talk. You can, but you don't have to. Think for a second. Celebrate your happy path first. I want everyone to be in a good mood to start. Think about your happy path. What's been working well this year? And what have you accomplished? And if you have a moment, you can jot it down. Take that for a moment. But then I also really want you to think about your fearful path. So that's where this is why I want to build the deep trust. It's like a retrospective. We're building our deep trust among the team here. What's broken? What's falling down? Where are your gaps? Is it security? Is it admin? Is it user adoption? Is it scalability? Is it resilience? And just take a moment and pick one or two fears. You don't have to share them. You can if you want, but you don't have to. And write it down and just hold on to it. And I'm serious about that. So we're going to take a second and everybody think about it, because I know I'm going to think about mine. You thinking about yours?
Yeah, I got one.
Okay, I got mine.
Yeah, and make sure if we didn't address that, let me know. I probably have at least an idea or a thought, and I can certainly follow up.
Anyone need more time to think?
Cool.
Nice, good, okay. So we're going to start. What we're going to do is we are going to break this down into a few categories and just kind of go through again really quickly. This is security. Let's get this shift out of the way. Get it? Let's get this shift out. So do me a favor right now, if you want. Just raise your hand if the problem that you're thinking about today that you want to maybe get some insight on has to do with security. I'm raising my hand for real, not as an example. Okay, everybody look around if you're in that crew. Check each other out. I mean, not check each other out. Wow. I mean, you can, but
Save it for later. That's what the dance is for tonight. Come on.
Yeah. All right, and we're going to time box this at 6 minutes. Take it away.
You got it. All right. So, how do you meet compliance and make sure that you know when something is changing inside of your Jenkins instance? How do you make sure that you know that all of your developers are hitting some sort of compliance that you're running into? Audit trail. Specific plugins that are going to notify you when something changes in your instance, when somebody makes a permissions change. That's going to be something like Audit Trail. That's going to be something like Job Config History. Make sure that you know when your developer's making changes, and make sure that they're making correct changes. And if they're not making correct changes, then find a way that they can't make those changes anymore.
All right. Business end of it, I deal with this a lot. Include, and I know there may be some reactions to this. Include security in your dev team. I'm seeing more and more people do this, actually putting a security person on your Scrum team, on your app development team. Have them in from the beginning. This, while it might seem painful, you're going to avoid a lot of big fines. Anyone in here have to deal with NIST, SOX, HIPAA, any of that fun stuff? Yeah. It's not, I'm going to say it's not fun, because oh boy is it. But some of the things we're starting to see, I didn't put one up here, but and actually I see him in the audience. I'm not going to call him out, but one of my customers is doing a cool thing with marking files after they've passed through certain systems, and then having scans at the end that are checking to make sure that those builds have the specific items and have gone through the mandatory checks. But we're starting to see, and I've just started to look at this. Anyone started to look at Anchor Engine at all? It's pretty cool, right? Like it seems like it has decent potential, so keep your eye on for that. We heard this morning also a little bit of talk at the CloudBees stuff with the governance. The Anchor Engine is an open source tool that's going to be doing policy-based container scans.
And to kind of follow up on that is, this allows you to not have like a random security scan if you have somebody that's inside of your team that is part of that security, because you're constantly being checked on inside of that team. That person can provide that input. I certainly, yeah. So separation of duties, things like the Matrix plugin, things like the RBAC plugin that's provided by CloudBees. Make sure that you have given specific permission to particular users. Make sure that other users do not have that specific permission. When you see changes being made, you make sure that that person is allowed to make those changes and that that's not going to cause a security risk later on. There are so many fine-grained permissions inside of Jenkins, and don't be afraid to leverage those as much as possible, and don't be afraid to give your developers as much permission as they can, such that they're not completely breaking everything, but that they don't have to worry about requesting permissions, is that they constantly have to send an email to somebody and they can't actually do any of their development work. Make sure that they already have those permissions.
Dovetailing on that, say you do separate your duties, but something has happened, and you've set up your security groups, and somebody makes a change that does allow somebody to violate whatever separate duties happens. This is a real-world story that happened to somebody I was working with. Classic case, something changed in their group settings or whatever that allowed a developer to release to production who should not have been allowed to release to production, right? And as a result, there was an audit. And the auditors spent days and days and days, and they found it in the logs who did it, and that's fine. But the question was, who allowed them to do it? Because really, unfortunately, a lot of auditing is still like pointing fingers. Who allowed them to do it? So we're starting to see a shift, too, of people, just like you're managing everything else in your version control, starting to manage, it's almost like in config as code, starting to manage your permissions to these different groups in your source code control. So then you also have an audit of who changed the permissions that allowed people to even do what they were allowed to do. This separation of duties thing, I think, again, is in the next 6 to 12 months, potentially, is going to become a lot easier for a lot of us. I didn't know about this morning when I saw Christina's call for people to help out with the governance. Everybody kind of nod if you remember where she put that page up in the keynote. If you work, I'm going to just stress this, because I work with a lot of fintechs, insurance, and federal government. So I really strongly encourage you, if you are dealing with NIST, HIPAA, SOX, any of that, please sign up for that to be one of our partners in helping us develop it, because the more you help us with that, the more we can create a tool that's really going to help the community. So that's just a little plug there. We got 1 minute, so we're going to rock this. Here we go.
Be aware of real security threats. Don't let a security team come in and scan something and say, this is a security threat, this is a security threat. Make sure that you're asking them a question, why is this a security threat? Be aware and react to those real security threats, and make sure that your DevOps tools are not affected by those potential real security threats. Update your Jenkins. Heck, we have a security update that happens constantly inside of Jenkins, and you see constant security updates that we release. And heck, CloudBees employees, open source community, you're going to see a lot of articles talking about what this got fixed, and make sure that you're picking up those security threats for real.
And yeah, the business need, I've seen a lot more of my customers putting in the static application security testing. Anyone doing like twist lock or check marks, doing that sort of thing? Yeah, people putting that in their IDE. So even before the build on commit, it's looking for things. And then there's other stuff further down the pipeline. So again, that's that shifting left. The earlier you bring it in, the less likely it might hurt a little up front. And again, there'll be a lot of work up front, but it will pay off because there'll be a lot less pain down the line. We did it. That was 6 minutes. All right, next topic. Management. You want to say it?
Yeah, let's do it. Management.
Go.
All right.
Oh, wait, what's our time box? 6 minutes.
6 minutes.
Hit it.
All right, so make sure you're creating trusted admins. Make sure there are lots of them that you can actually trust and that are allowed to make changes, because the problem is when you go and you limit yourself to a single admin, not only does that person have way too much work on their plate, it also takes forever for anything to get done inside of your instance, inside of any sort of DevOps tool. So make sure that you're spreading out that load, and then you isolate that person so that if they do break something, they're only breaking their thing.
From a business perspective, I really hope I have some managers and people with access to budgets here, and that's not because I'm trying to sell anything. I'm trying to help engineers get the training that they need. And it's not just about money of sending people to courses. I think it's about giving developers and admins the time in their schedule to be able to learn part of this, to be able to experiment and try things as part of what's required. We all get tied up in our deliverables. I strongly believe in the training and experimentation is part of your deliverable. So if you can, build that into your sprints.
So then, again, isolate teams. Make sure that, take advantage of the Teams UI inside of CloudBees if you have the opportunity. Make sure that, like I said, when they're breaking something, they own it. It's their responsibility to bring it up, and you're like, talk to maybe support, be able to bring it back up. But make sure, like I said, that they have the administrative capability and they have the burden to be able to fix it.
You know what I forgot to do? Who in here, the problem you were thinking of in the beginning, has to do with management or administrative burden of your Jenkins instance or instances? Take a look around, check each other out, give a wink, give a nod. Cool. I'm serious about that. Like, if you go talk to each other. I don't know about you guys, but some of the things I learn about the most is when I'm standing in the hallway afterwards. I shouldn't say that during my own presentation. But anyway, I'm focusing. Business need, the plugins. Wow, Renegade teams using crazy plugins. I'm sure no one in this room has ever had that problem. Chuck Norris. Do they really need these? Or is there a better way for them to get the business need done that they're trying to get done? So sometimes they're like, I need this plugin. I need it, and it's been deprecated. It's a security violation, whatever. Step back, like with everything else, with that person or those people and say, all right, why do you think you need that? If you are a CloudBees customer, we do have the assurance program and the plugin catalog, which obviously any of us are happy to talk to you about, that helps you control the plugins that people have access to.
Again, containerize everything. You want to make sure that you're building out an architecture that is wide, not narrow, so that way when somebody actually does break something, it's literally just theirs. So that way their container is broken, it's not bringing down your Kubernetes cluster, it's not bringing down your stack, it's not doing anything else other than making them unable to work. And make sure that they own that container, and when it's down and broken, that they have a way of bringing it back up.
This is one of my favorites from a business perspective. Again, isolated agents with predetermined tools. And what we mean by that is don't feel like you need to pound everything that any engineer is ever going to need on all of your agents. Make them specific to what the type of build is going to be. Also, mapping your business structures to architecture. Whew, this is what I'm not saying I have the answer to this one. This is one of the ones that I come with a lot of my customers come to me with questions of, I have 50 teams, I have 100 teams. How do I best mirror that in my Jenkins architecture? Would love to have a longer chat with people over a beer with that one, because I think that is sort of a lot of the next frontier is what does that look like? Some of our customers do it by application, maybe one master per application team. Some are doing it by this is pre-prod, this is prod, this is dev, and separating it that way. There's pros and cons to each. I am fascinated by that topic. I wish I had the correct answer right now. Obviously, it's going to be different for organizations. But if you're anyone dealing with that, that's a comment, yeah. I want to get a focus group on that. Not a focus group, a working group.
Make sure that you're reporting downtime. Make sure you're getting analytics. Make sure you're not just checking, is the master up, is the master down. Make sure you can predict failures. And then celebrate the winners. That is one of the things that I don't feel like that we do nearly enough inside of the DevOps community, is that we need to make sure that the people who are running successfully, everybody needs to emulate them rather than we need to punish the people who are not running successfully. We need to make sure that everybody knows, you develop playbooks, you develop methods of documenting what people are doing successfully, and then make sure that everybody has that as their goal. And take advantage of that as much as possible, and analytics allows you to do something like that. So something like DevOptics, something like, we have a Elasticsearch reporter. You could use your own custom Elasticsearch instance. You can go and report on VM metrics. You could use something like App Dynamics. However you want to do it, make sure that you're tracking when Jenkins is down, why it's down, and make sure that the people who are going and doing it successfully and Jenkins is never down, everybody's doing exactly that.
I wasn't going to say this, it's not on the slide, but you made me think of something else. Going with the celebrating your winners. And this is not none of these are my ideas, by the way. I love my job because I get to take everybody else's hard work and present it to you like it's mine. It's fantastic. Open source your own stuff to your own user base. Like if somebody's writing something and they do it better than what you want it to do as the admin, take it, use it, replicate it for your other teams. Open source within your own community, that stuff, and that can help you with some of your own management. Along with what Alex was saying with analytics, look at where your resources are being taxed, in particular if you have a certain time of day of week. Again, the DevOptics and some other tools Alex mentioned can help you do that. Maybe that's not when you do your upgrade. Maybe that's when you go look at those teams and say, hey, what is it that's taxing that? It might be something that can be resolved. It might be something you just need to shift some things around and move things That's our time on that one.
Increasing use and adoption. Make sure you're getting as many people onto this instance as possible and make sure it's easy.
So who's thinking about pain related to user adoption?
That one's mine. How do I get as many people on Jenkins as possible?
Especially when users are changing so much. All right, we're going to do this one in 5 minutes.
Yeah. All right.
Got it.
Make sure you're creating a well-documented process. Make sure it is editable immediately. Create Confluence pages after Confluence pages after Confluence pages to make sure that you are not repeating yourself as much as possible. You're giving somebody a link. And make sure that it follows from the beginning to the end, and maybe even why you're actually following that exact process, because that will help your users better understand.
I also like parallel development. Have people working on kind of the same thing with each other and sharing it so you don't lose knowledge. What are engineers already using and what do they want to use? Obviously, I'm biased. I'm up here. I work for CloudBees. I'm going to say that. But you always have to provide tools that they want to use. I believe very strongly at the end of the day, and I apologize again if there's like senior management people in here who are trying to top down, but a lot of this is bottom up. We all know that engineers that we're going to go and use, y'all are going to go use what you want to use and find a way to use it. Find that, cultivate it, figure out how you can harness that. A lot of business cases we're seeing now, it's like you can't fight against that. The big part of that too, kind of going with it, is show off the tools. The internal evangelism. I was just talking with one organization, and they're going to start, an internal kind of Jenkins days. They're a larger company, so that they can internally show the work they're doing with each other.
Yeah, think about how many developers you've got in your company. I mean, imagine how valuable this is. Be able to do that inside. That would be a great learning opportunity. So make sure that the time for you to be able to see results, whether that's builds being finished, whether that's artifacts being generated, make sure it's short as possible. So that way, in terms of, I have an issue, or I have code, I need it to be built. How do I get that started inside of Jenkins? How do I get it so it gives me builds and gives me results as quickly as possible? Narrow that window down using templates, using pipelines, using existing Jenkins files, using whatever tools are at your disposal. Make sure that they can see build results as quickly as possible. If that means 5 minutes, that's going to be the best situation that you possibly can imagine.
And consider common necessary functionality that can be templated. If you have pipelines and you've got 100 of them and everybody's snowflaking and doing their own things, find out what sort of sections of those can be templated. Let's see, what else did I say? Sorry. That way those less interested in Jenkins can do the minimal variables to existing pipelines. So I'm fascinated by the fact that a Jenkins user is constantly changing. You have everything from someone who's an expert pipeline developer and wants to write everything and stay up on the latest yada yada, to people that just say, you know what, I just want to submit my code, I just want it built. So try to working with both of those. I'm going to kind of tend towards the more novice because that's what I am. I'm not a coder. I would want to be able to just send my stuff and make it work. So that will give more freedom both to the advanced users on their end, if you're using multi-master environments, so that they can play around with theirs, but then maybe have some more lockdown environments where the user can just submit their variables and the job will run. And I'm just going to say training again because I'm a fan.
Empower your users. Make sure that you're developing champions inside of your company. Make sure that the people who are doing great pipelines, great work, make sure that they get celebrated, that they start getting time to be able to write documentation, that they get time to be able to train other people. Leverage something like our support at CloudBees. We have an open source support that is available for purchase, and we can help you guys be able to get to that point. But also make sure, like I said, your developers, somebody in your company is probably already doing exactly what you need to be doing. Make sure you're pulling that person and make sure that you're educating everybody around the company.
Business side, who are you hiring? The skill set has changed for who we need to hire and who we need to look at. Look at Linux, look at build and release experience, look at testing experience. It's no longer just bringing in engineers who can build stuff. They need to be able to do their own unit tests. What tools do people have experience with? Provide, again, options for trainings and certifications, and lots of experimentation right now. We're seeing a lot of this. A lot of experimentation with team structure. Should I have a centralized DevOps world, like DevOps, department, the Center for Excellence, they're controlling everything? Or do I have DevOps reps on each of my apps teams? How does that that work best? What's the best situation there? That's another one, by the way, where I would love to talk more about that, because I've seen companies do one, say it doesn't work, do the other, say it doesn't work, go back to this one, and then it's like, well, are we reporting to the CIO? Or no, we're reporting to the engineers, but then the ops people are out of it, and it's just this whole. Is anyone else struggling with that? Like, where do you put DevOps in your company? Yeah, and I don't have the answer. Again, I'd love to talk more about that, because I think it is aligned a little with what I was talking about before with how do you best architect your business need into Jenkins. So yeah, that was 5 minutes. I don't think I answered anything there, but we have a lot of talk about that. And I guess, sorry, I'm going to say one more thing there.
Yeah.
The reason I'm so strong on that one is that that's one of those examples of it's not just about the technology. Right? It's about who's using the technology, who's advocating for it, what metrics do you need to make your argument. It's all this sort of soft skills or politics or whatever that a lot of us don't like to deal with, but they're really super critical in the success of Jenkins in your organization. So that's why I kind of harp on it a little bit.
So next thing is scalability. How do we make sure that Jenkins can scale? How do we make sure that our business can scale so that everybody, as many users as we are going to get after that previous section, that they're all able to use Jenkins on a good scale? So do not create monolithic masters. Make sure that you're spreading out load as much as possible, and then when something is breaking, it's immediately obvious because they're the ones developing on it. They see when stuff breaks immediately. So, if I don't know if you guys have ever done, but I've seen masters with 70,000 jobs. How do you know when one is failing? The only way you know is you have a single developer who pings another person, who pings another person, who has to ping the administrator, who has to go back through and look at the build logs and make a guess as to what this person is doing and then be able to figure out how to be able to fix it. So you shrink that size down, and then you're talking between two people, two developers. They're both going through their logs, they're figuring out why it broke, and they know all the changes that happened because they're managing their own masters. So they just installed plugins, my build all of a sudden broke, boom, done, plugin.
+1. How many people dealing with scalability issues? Your pain isn't scaling? Yeah, it's tough. I'm not going to lie. Also, what he's talking about is it gives more freedom to advanced users, and it allows you to increase users without increasing downtime. One thing I'm thinking of here, too, is say you are an organization that has the Frankenstein master that we talked about this morning and has 20,000, 30,000 jobs sitting on there, and you want to go to a more multi-tenant environment, smaller masters. Please don't sit and wait and figure out, how do I best move all 20,000 of these and do a spreadsheet or something and then start moving. Like, I've seen analysis paralysis on this end for 2 years without getting any advantage of moving to a smaller master environment. So even if it means just greenfielding your new teams in the multi-tenant environment and just hacking away at this beast over here, cool. But don't sit and wait to take advantage of what's here right now.
Try and use pipelines as much as possible. They're more flexible. You can do more things inside of a single job. Creating a new job is fast and easy. If you're talking about multi-branch pipelines, you create a new branch, it has the exact same Jenkins file, you make small updates to be able to be pulling from a different GitHub repo, to maybe adjusting a shell step inside of there. You all of a sudden, you have a branch indexing event, you have a new job. It's so much faster to be able to do something like that. That was interesting.
Yes, rock and roll. Okay. Pipelines tend to be easier to visualize. So in that way, if you're trying to scale and you're the person who's in charge of saying where's what and where's each job moving, it helps there. It's easier to reuse some of the advanced code in the shared libraries, and it tends to also be easier to use gating. So if you're trying to, again, keep track of where things are or you have mandatory scans in place, it can help you in that area. The cloud, the cloud, the cloud!
Make sure you're taking advantage of the cloud as much as possible. Flexible environments, scalable images for agents. You're allocating resources. You just request more resources. It's super easy. And then maintenance downtime. You just move over to a different cloud. Like, that's not a problem. If a server has to go down for maintenance, it's much easier inside of the cloud to be able to not have massive downtime inside of Jenkins. And then it allows you to scale out because of that.
Okay, so you're not paying for resources that you're not using, which is great. If you need to make the business case for your cloud, that helps. It also reduces the time to acquire, my air quotes, hardware. I have people who used to take 6 months, and then it can just take instant, which is huge. One person I was talking with this morning, it was interesting because I've heard some people say that they're on the business end of it, that they're limited on like their AWS spend or their Google spend or whatever, and management's concerned about that, which you're rightfully so. And they're comparing it to, here's us running it on-prem and managing everything, and here's our AWS, and it's looking more expensive over here. Sometimes when that analysis is happening, the over here in the cloud, they're not taking into account two things. They're not taking into account the maintenance and management of all this stuff that you're offloading over here, and then they're also not taking into account that the scalability. They're not taking into account, if it goes up, it goes down. When you need more, you can get more, or not use it when you don't. So make sure if you're kind of in that position of making the argument financially, that you consider both of those things when you're making that argument.
Absolutely.
I think we're good there. Yeah. Last
Resilience. Make sure that your Jenkins is as resilient as possible. Make sure when it goes down, it comes up as quickly as possible. Make sure you can roll back, source code everything that you possibly can. Pipelines, when they're in source code, when something breaks, you just roll back to the previous version. Configuration items. All of a sudden this broke. If your config is inside of source code, great. Make sure that as you're doing releases, you're doing individual items that can always be rolled back if you need to.
Anybody dealing with problems of resilience? This gentleman here is great. He's raising his hand on every single one. Not the users. Just to be fair in my representation of you, sir, I apologize. He's got plenty of users, which is probably why we have an issue with resiliency and scalability. Look at that. I got you. All right. Business perspective, version control, source code management, it's amazing from a business angle. It's much simpler to move jobs and applications around. If an application team needs to shift somewhere else, you're good. You can keep those trains running when people, tech, or processes change, because we all know that can happen quite frequently.
Make sure you're upgrading. Make sure that process is as easy as possible. I know, praise, is that I've seen Jenkins from 1.5.8 up to what it is now, which is like 2.38, to like 2.38, something like that. Anyways, every single LTS that we have released has had less breaking issues in the process of upgrading. It has been worlds of difference from upgrading from the 1.0 versions to the current versions. Make sure that you have a process to test that upgrade. Make sure if you can, automate that process, and make sure that test process is a real test process, not, oh yeah, it kind of worked. It has jobs in it. You've tested those jobs run, they run successfully, and they're very similar to the jobs that you have on production. Make sure that you're doing that as much as possible.
Similarly, the bigger the gap, the harder the upgrade. Not a surprise. It's why we iterate in software development now. Please continue to iterate in your upgrades. And if you're not, it is so important to dig into why teams aren't upgrading. Is it the plugins? Are they afraid that their pipelines are going to break? Is it all, it's one of those things that's really painful potentially. Find out why it's painful, fix those reasons, and then it's going to be easier to continue to upgrade.
Again, make sure you're using containers. They're isolated, so when they break, you're still resilient inside of all your other containers. Make sure, and they can be really easily moved. Kubernetes is super easy to spin up a new pod inside of with a new Jenkins inside of it. You don't have to worry about how long it takes Jenkins to be up when it goes down, because you just move it on to new resources.
Similarly, self-healing. It reduces previously heavy HA methods, anyone who's tried to implement. And I know that self-healing and HA are not technically the same things. We can have that discussion later. But talking about general health and keeping things up and running, it's so much easier with containers to limit that downtime and to not lose your stuff. So from business angle, again, critical.
Make sure you're taking advantage of pipeline. Again, is that pipeline is restartable after a Jenkins failure. It'll automatically start up any jobs that were actively running at the time. It is so it's durable through those actual restarts. All the plugins, theoretically, we'll go with almost all the plugins are going to be resumable as well. And then things like shell steps, they keep running even though the pipeline isn't actually actively checking on them. So you literally had no downtime in that actual pipeline or inside of the master restart.
Related to that, again, kind of going back to what we talked about with limiting plugins, I was just made aware of this because I learn something new like every single day. I assume most people here are. My head's blown already from this entire conference, but there's the list of plugins that are technically compatible with Pipeline. You can set up your instances then to only be able to use those. So Pipeline is resilient to a point, but if you want to even make it better, limit the use to only those pipelines that are going to allow you to do that. And I'm just saying that, again, if you're also dealing with limiting your plugins and using Pipeline, then you can increase your security if you don't allow your users to use things that have been deprecated. All right, so let's see if we did it. Did it work?
Anybody get some help out of here? A little bit? Small bits.
All right.
Sweet.
Does anybody brave enough who wants to actually maybe share a little bit about, hey, I was dealing with this pain, and this is an idea I want to try? You don't have.
That's okay.
It's okay.
Sorry.
We
It's not
understand.
required.
We can go straight to Q&A.
Make sure, yeah, what's up?
As far as the Q&A, I didn't raise my hand for anything, and if you in the future ask, who doesn't have that problem? Because I found a myriad of things are solved by you don't have developer access to production, period. And they don't have administrative privileges to Jenkins, period. Even if you have such a small installation, you've got one Jenkins, not your own. Which is then you would probably use an LDAP and not just using anybody to do anything, even without RBAC. You can actually make a lot of problems not happen.
So I'm going to summarize just because I'm on a mic and I want to make sure everyone hears what you're saying. So correct me if I'm wrong. What I hear you saying from trust me, I'm used to that in this business. No, what I hear you saying is that in your installation, you limit the access to production into admin. And that way you're not allowing engineers to go into production, and that way they're not messing things up, and that way you're not having stability issues, resiliency issues.
They can't configure Jenkins.
They can't configure Jenkins.
We used to have,
Can they write their own pipelines?
pardon?
Can they write their own pipelines?
No. And they have no interest. They specialize in dev. We specialize in building code.
So that's one of those centralized structures we're talking about, where it sounds like where you have a centralized Jenkins sort of admin center, and your engineers submit the jobs. Your department is responsible for Jenkins administration, Jenkins configuration, and pipelines.
And that shifts the common errors to a whole different set.
It shifts the common errors. It also, anyone have kind of maybe an argument against that?
I mean, I have a question for you. So what do you do when a job breaks? Who fixes it?
And we do triage, and if it's dev thing, we don't have to go and look. We have about under 2,000 jobs, and it's not really a Frankenstein. It's just a single prod master, a single non-prod master. But we have notifications sent to the dev teams, and we get notifications. And
So when something fails,
Can you repeat
get an
his
email
answer?
and the dev team, yeah, sorry. So no one has to look through logs, but so if they don't have access to Jenkins, then how do they get to those logs?
they can read access.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. Okay, sorry, maybe I misunderstood what your initial. I thought you were saying that they don't have access to prod Jenkins.
It's for me.
By the time it gets there, it's not breaking any prod, it's not breaking any
Okay, I gotcha. So they don't have access to prod, but they do have access to dev environments, but it's not going to break inside of prod because it's already been tested inside of the dev environments.
my fear. This is, I'm a Hotwire, and there's a legacy environment where they had like 1.5 people from all Hotwire maintaining the installations. And so right now, we are upgrading. The prod version is on 1.6 something, because the last time somebody upgraded, they just blindly went from 1.6 to 2.2, and were astonished to find that they could. I don't have CloudBees right now, but if you get CloudBees, use the curated plugins. There's no such thing as a bad plugin. It either works or it doesn't work. And for resilience, if you are doing resilience for a job that takes 5 minutes, you're losing performance capacity and creating room for error, because you actually run much faster if you don't have to be surviving with the movie. Things like that.
So basically what you were saying was Your fear is the legacy environment.
That we are moving to modernize everything.
Yes.
So we have some pipelines, some old style, and some multi-job, and we have a lot of things to rewrite. And we're moving everything out of the data center into AWS, and we have some other initiatives. So it's a wonderful way to really have an impact, and we can't screw it. That's the big fear.
So is it my understanding is you're trying to migrate to this new, you said AWS environment?
We're moving from the data center into AWS.
Yep. Moving from, yep.
Potentially, we're moving from community edition to cloud-based.
Okay.
And we will modernize all of the
At the same time. So moving from open source to cloud-based potentially, and at the same time you would theoretically modernize everything and you're worried about how that upgrade's going to go.
we have to do all of it in parallel.
Yes.
So it's exhilarating, and we're on a wild ride. Once you go down and start the ski jump, you can't say,
That's so. I mean, that one was specifically. I mean, talking about make sure that you're testing up that upgrade. Make sure that you have jobs as much as possible that are already running on that newer version. And make sure that it's actually running.
that was before me. Kind of like, you did that?
Yeah.
One of the things that we're talking about here is these large modernization projects. You know, you've got the legacy environment, no matter how mature it is, and you have to move it to something else. I'm seeing a lot, and I'm glad you brought this up because it's something I wanted to talk about. As a former product owner in the downstream of software, you know, we were Scrum, we were sprinting, we had our deliverables, we had our benchmarks, and a lot of what I'm seeing now with DevOps teams is they go into these large projects. I say we go into these large projects and we go, all right, make it happen. You know, we don't sprint, we don't do issues, we don't do deliverables, we don't do epics anymore, and it's like, why not? So it's like with that sort of the iterative planning that comes along with Agile on the downstream, I want to see personally more teams doing that when they're doing their DevOps, you know, modernizations, refreshes. We have another question here. Thank you, sir.
I wanted to talk about one of my user adoption issues, which is something that is very difficult for us. We built lots of complex pages that get out of date really fast. And what I find is that we're having to invent our own shared library. We're having to invent our own template Jenkins files and so forth, in part because we can't turn to CloudBees online examples. If I look at the CloudBees website and say, what would a good declarative pipeline look like? I don't have a central place that I can point developers to outside of my own conflict page. So I feel burdened by the need for documentation.
So I'm going to restate it and see if I get this correct. You have your own internal Confluence pages for things, but you are burdened because you have to create your own shared libraries and documentation, and you can't, like, for example, point to a CloudBees best practice pipeline example for business case X or whatever.
Right.
Is that correct? Anyone else facing that?
Well, declarative pipeline in particular.
Declarative?
Yeah. I mean, just in terms of our documentation, we don't have a lot of, if any, Jenkins file examples for people to be able to potentially follow. But it's also because, I mean, is there a standard build process inside of a declarative pipeline? That would work.
There's that option. There's
That-
also
that-
keep your, yeah.
That is a possible option.
I think some of the apps that people were talking about earlier this morning are coming and are going to help. I think if you can look at the kubectl stuff, that might help as well. What you're talking about, you are, trust me, not alone.
Yes.
At all.
That
It is a
accurate.
need. I wish I had an answer for it right now. It is, again, I'm going to encourage you as well to become part of the group that's making recommendations. And whoever your CSM is, I'd be happy to talk with you afterwards too and make sure that that need is heard because I think it's important. I'm going to see if anyone else does really quickly. I'm going to go right over here. Sorry, I want to make sure she gets heard.
That's perfect. We want to connect you guys as much as possible. So
Yeah, and we
absolutely,
only have like
feel
1
free.
minute, and I want to make sure her question
Yeah.
gets addressed.
Right. So that's basically what I was talking about. Yeah, yeah. So sorry. You have one master where all of the pipelines are located. How do we enable our developers to be able to do their own development without permissions? Does that sound correct? Did I maybe misword something? Okay. They can't write their. Are they incapable of writing their own pipelines? Or is it more that you guys just don't give them permissions to write their own pipelines? So that is mostly the issue when I see something like that. It is because they look at a Jenkins file or a pipeline and they say, this is terrifyingly huge. Wrap as much of that as possible into shared libraries as you can. And so then they're just making very simple API calls and they're adjusting what variables are getting fed in using those API calls to the, and so then the Jenkins file looks really simple. It's only 30 lines instead of 600. And so then when they start looking at that Jenkins file, they're like, oh, this is less scary. And so then once that's able to happen, you're able to move them into these smaller team masters where they can potentially have a little bit more permission to be able to have more access. And so then, like I said, you wouldn't be necessarily scared of breaking a single environment for 10 developers because they're not breaking it for your entire company. Only one team is potentially behind.
It sounds like the dance music has started outside. I don't know if this is working or not. Is this working?
That is working. Your little mic is not working.
I know. There's we have to end.
Yes.
Obviously, we could talk about this forever, and so appreciate people's feedback. Find us, find other people, go to the Jenkins section in the event zone. Make sure you give feedback. Thank you guys for being here.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.